I've got the link to the first recording already up, although it probably is not available yet. All right, here we go. Moving on. So let me check my root directory here. This is it. Oh my God, I put that in there for me too. That's ridiculous. Okay, so remember inside images, we've got some of these guys, and you might recognize some of the names. There's Chua, which is Amy, and then there's Sorkin, Andrew Ross Sorkin, and then Tubin. I'm sure these directly off of a stock photo site. Let's go ahead and get those guys in there. Now the textbook, if anyone's actually reading along in the perspective, they want us to put the images after those H3s. And the H3s I'm talking about are these three guys right here that we just stopped by putting the line breaks in. I think that's the last thing we did. But I'm going to have us put those images before the H3s instead. And there's a reason for that, it may not be clear until we start doing CSS. And because of a certain thing that's very commonly done with images in CSS, that only really works if you put the image before the text that follows that is associated with it, then I don't know why they didn't do it that way. I don't. So go ahead and put the image in front of each H3. So an image tag is IMG. Remember, these are all English-based, which makes most of them very easy to remember. And it's one of these empty elements because it doesn't have content. And you might think, oh, wait a minute, isn't the image itself the content? Yeah, it kind of is. But you actually wind up putting this, because it's an external file that's being sourced in, like a JavaScript file, then that's what you do. You indicate it in the content of an attribute instead of doing it in between open and closing tags like this. So it's IMG, and this has got to have src, which you might recall from that script element in the Unit 1 demo from last time. Source src equals, and then we put in a relative path to the image itself. So all of these images are in the images subfolder, like that. Oops. And then pick out which one. So the first one is, who's the first one again? Is it Sorkin? Tubin? I think it's Tubin. Yeah. So images/tubin75.jpg. Now this one here, I haven't been able to get these JPEGs to even show up here in this little preview panel. But if I go back over to the browser and refresh, then there's the image. Huzzah! A little thumbnail image, right? So let's go ahead and get the rest of them in here. So there's one in front of the Jeffrey Tuba. The next one's going to be Sorkin75. So IMG src equals, and then images. Why isn't it working anymore? I guess I have to down. There. And it's going to be Sorkin. And then the last one's going to be Chua. Oops. IMG src equals, and then Chua. There we go. And once again, I'll go ahead and save this and refresh over here just to see those images show up. I like to check my work in the browser pretty constantly, personally, just to make sure everything's going right, especially once we get hyperlinks in there, because I've just seen so many broken hyperlinks over the years. I like to pretty much immediately go into a web page and like check every link, make sure that none of them are broken, because nothing screams unprofessional like broken hyperlinks or missing images. Now this is not the complete code. If we were to take this into the validator tool right now, this would not pass validation because an image tag not only needs a source attribute, it also needs an alt attribute, which is often misnamed an alt tag. It has to have one in there. It's considered that important. Um, it's an accessibility thing. There are a lot of people and computer systems who might be parsing through your page and not be able to see the image. And what they need to have instead is some kind of description of the image. So they have some alternative content to parse through as opposed to just the image itself. So that's what the alt means. Alt equals. Now in terms of validation, that's all you have to do. It's kind of silly actually. You just need to have an alt tag in there and you don't have to even have any content in here. But if you want to do it right, so that like a Google bot will actually know what this image is about, then go ahead and just paste in like Jeffrey Toobin, like that. If you wanted to be a little bit more explicit about it, you could do like October speaker Jeffrey Toobin. That would make even more sense. But for now, let's just go ahead and keep it simple. For each one of these, put an alt attribute. And then for the content, just copy and paste the name of that month's speaker. Kabow. And next one, alt and kaboom. Now, it used to be when you go to a browser, if the image had an alt on it, when you'd hover, it would give you that text as a little tooltip pop-up. They don't do that anymore because that was actually an inappropriate use for it. If you need that, if you need it so when the user hovers over something and gets a little tooltip, then you can use a title attribute instead. I'm not going to go ahead and type that in here because it's really not necessary, but if that's what you're looking for, that's the way to do it instead of an alt tag. So here's what your images should like with the alt in there. If you do them without the alts, then you'll go to validate and it's not going to pass validation. Questions about images?
No questions.
Now, there's a common structural element that will go around an image and whatever tag that it's meant to accompany it. And this is an HTML5 thing where you will see a figure element. And it's referencing like the figure in a textbook or something like that. And figure can be used for all kinds of things. It can be used not just for images. It can be used for other media elements like audio and video elements. It can be used for code examples. Those can go into figures. Okay, basically anything that might go into a figure in a textbook is fair game for a figure element in HTML. But the way you see it most commonly is with images and the text that's supposed to go along with them. In fact, there's even a special tag here called a fig caption, like an image caption that you could use instead of the H3 here, for instance. But it's certainly not a problem just to leave it as the H3. So I'll go ahead and throw these guys in here.
So why did you put figure on each one of those instead of encapsulating each of the H3 headings inside of the figure?
The H3 headings are inside the figure.
Right. But you went figure and then that first figure. Then you went figure the Sorkin one. Then you made another figure for Chua. Why didn't you just make the first figure before Toobin and then close it out right after Chua?
Well, as far as I know, figures are supposed to be used individually.
Just it worked on mine.
Like a figure in a textbook would generally involve like one code example as opposed to several code examples. Although I realized in saying that I'm contradicting myself because that doesn't happen in the textbook that we're using right now. So that's a good question, actually. I've always seen it like this. I've always done it like this. I would have to check and see if it's at all considered a thing to include more than one element inside of a figure like that, like including several different images with their fig captions. Don't think I've ever seen it that way, but I could check in and see.
My previewer did not give me an error on it, so that's why I was asking.
Yeah, I didn't imagine that it would give an error. I imagine that this would
okay, so it actually
is
just like yours, it's tab indented on the web page.
Say again?
It like it's tab indented under this where it's in line with the S on this. It did the same thing for mine.
I don't know what you mean. You're gonna have to share
Like,
screen with me
okay,
if you
like
want.
that, like the way you had it versus doing it encapsulated all, the way you just had it before you undid it,
Uh-huh.
it came up to the same thing.
So what did it come up?
Just like that. Like it was perfectly fine.
Okay, yeah. Like I said, I don't think it would throw an error or anything like that. I'm just wondering if there's like a best practices reason not to do it, simply because I've never seen it done like this, and I've never actually even considered doing it like this myself. So that's what I'll have to check out and see if there's a best practices reason not to do it this way, or an SEO reason not to do it this way. But this is the way I've always seen it in the past. But that's a really good question. I don't know. I'll have to look into that if I can.
Here I go breaking the freaking teacher again.
Works for me. Okay, cool. So for now, I'll just do it this way because this is the way I've seen it. Let's see. Do we want to go one step further here? I know you guys have probably seen enough code here. Let me just to round out the chapter. I was planning on possibly actually creating other pages and making these links all work back, cycling through universally so that every page can get you back to the home page and so on. But let's just see what the links look like for now. They won't actually go anywhere. We'll fix that next time. So a hyperlink is not an H element or an HL element. It is an A element. Why? Because it's actually an anchor element. In the beginning, an anchor was more for linking to as opposed to linking from, or actually it was pretty much equally both. So if you wanted to link to a particular place on a web page, like halfway down a long article or something like that, you would link to an anchor. And then you could use that same anchor with a hyperreference to link to somewhere else, either a different part of the same page or somewhere else on a different page or what have you. Anyway, that's just a little history of why it's called anchor instead of like link or hyperlink or something like that. It is hypertext, however. That's the whole concept behind hypertext markup language. Naming anchors and linking to them is generally not done anymore. You use IDs on divs and other structural elements instead. So A is not an empty element. We're going to surround the clickable text with our A tag, our anchor tag. And then in order to have this actually go somewhere, then we put a hyperreference element on here. We saw this once before briefly on Tuesday, right? We did a link href, for the style sheet, and then we linked to a style sheet. I don't know why they use the same thing instead of using an src or source tag. It seems like I read a discussion on Stack Overflow about that once upon a time, but I cannot remember what the actual answer was. In any case, it's href, hyperreference for this. And let's say that we had, as we will have next week, let's say we had a speakers subfolder with our speaker pages in there. And then we had a page called tubin.html. And that is a very simple anchor tag right there. So I will do the same thing for each of these three, and then we will call it a day as far as coding. I'm just going to put these in here. We'll take a look at what they look like in the browser. We'll click on them to see that, hey, this doesn't go anywhere yet. This is actually a broken link, and then we will fix it on either tomorrow night or on Monday, or Tuesday, one of those. Let's see. Let's run the Sorkin. Oh, wait, no. We're going into speakers subfolder, right? Speakers / and then Sorkin.html. And don't forget to cut and paste that closing anchor that it auto-completed for you after the text. You've got to have the text surrounded by the A tags, opening and closing, in order for this to be clickable. This third one, where did it go? Here we go. Let me see if I remember correctly. And I'm not going to put in the hyperreference on this one, just to start out with. So if I save this now, I'm going to pop over to the browser and check it out there. And there we go. There's the Jeffrey Toobin, and there's the Andrew Ross Sorkin. And notice that this link here, even though I put the anchor tag in there, I didn't put the hyperreference attribute in there, and the text is not clickable. It doesn't create the link for you unless you put the hyperreference on. And again, this is left over from the olden days when you might have an anchor that was meant to be linked to instead of from, and you didn't want it to be clickable text. So let me go ahead and put the href attribute in there. And let's see, speakers subfolder /chua.html. Go back over here and refresh, and now it's clickable. These are broken links. Click on one, goes to file not found. This is like the last thing you ever want to actually happen on a commercial website, right? Nothing will break your consumer confidence like feeling like the website is not a professionally run operation. So what we'll do first tomorrow, instead of launching directly into the exercise that I have planned for us, is we'll go ahead and finish this up. And what we're going to do for that is we will save this same file 3 more times as different files. We'll save it as, we'll save it as chua.html, sorkin.html, and tubin.html into a speaker subfolder. And then we'll just get rid of most of this content for each of those pages. It'll just be a placeholder. And so the H1 that says this season's guest speakers, it'll have that speaker's name on it, and then there'll be like an H2 that says this page under construction, and then there will be a paragraph containing a hyperlink that will allow the user to go back to the home page again. So there's no need for us to do that tonight. I want to make sure that we have a chance to go on to the page validation here. So we'll go ahead and stop it here. If there are any questions about hyperlinks in the time being, just the syntax, let me know. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure this is saved, and we're going to go to the validation tool. So I was remembering, and I had forgotten about this until just kind of noticing it in the middle of the demo on Tuesday. There actually are two, it's like a duplicate site or an alternative site where you've got the validator.nu, which I think is what I wound up just going for automatically last time. Let me open up a new tab here. So validator.nu, like this, and that brings you to this interface. And I was just kind of playing around with this afternoon, and I remembered, and I had forgotten this, that sometimes if you type in something weird, this thing breaks and it gives you an actual routing error just by typing in, like putting in some code that it wasn't expecting or something like that. So if you wind up with that trouble, then there is also the one, which I think is the official one, on w3.org. So this is, let's see, validator.w3.org. W3 is the World Wide Web Consortium. /nu, like this. So either way, it's the new HTML checker. If you just go to this one without the NU, then you'll get this older one here, and I don't recommend using that one because, as far as I know, this isn't really up to date with all the stuff that's available in HTML5. You'll try doing some HTML5 things, and it'll start complaining at you. So make sure you go to the NU one here. And you can check by address, which is only intended to be grabbing something from another web server. You can do a file upload, or you can do text input. Let's go ahead and do file upload for right now, and then we'll try the text input. So this is what I think I was told on Tuesday. This is what you want to do to all your HTML pages before you submit them to me. Excuse me, because after checking file names and so on, maybe doing a quick glance over of the code, this is the first thing I'm going to do. And because it's such an easy way to find mistakes and correct them, I will take off points for it because you guys can do this easily, right? So let's go ahead and grab file upload, choose my file. Fine, let's see, that's unit 1. I'm going to go to, where am I? Unit 2. And here's the index.html that we were just working on. I'm going to open that. And I like to be able to see the source personally. But it's up to you, really. I mean, really, it's just a way of finding errors. And it's worthwhile to read the warnings, too. Sometimes you see a warning and you're just like, I don't know what to do about that. It's asking for ARIA roles or something like that. I have no idea. That's fine. Just go ahead and read them anyway if you get them, because you can learn some stuff about HTML by doing it. I'm going to go ahead and check. And I've got something going, no, I got a green error here, green bar here. That's what you're looking for. No errors or warnings to show. If you're getting anything else at all, then read through the error list. And remember that sometimes the error actually, like the mistake happened on a previous or prior line to the line number that it actually gives you, because sometimes it's like a closing bracket that got missed or a slash that got missed or something like that. Um, and then also keep in mind, sometimes one error will lead to a whole slew of like red lines here. I've seen students come back with like 20 or 30 errors, and we'll fix like one or two things, and like all those errors get collapsed and wind up getting thrown back out again and get green. So just to check, did anybody get any red this time around from the in-class exercise here? No errors? Okay, cool. You will at some point. There's almost no way around it. So make sure this is a great spell checker for you, right? Make your code valid, and make it nice and clean, and so on and so forth. So last thing I want to show you guys. So this guy right here, if you go to the classroom and go to useful links for HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, and review the material here. There we go. So I actually have the other one in here. I've got the validator.nu. I'll make sure to put both links in here to both. In case one of them starts to give you trouble, like it has me in the past, then you'll be able to use the other one. But they're basically just mirrors of each other.
Hey, Mr. Briscoe, can you do the image, the hyperlink again, the href one more time?
Yeah, sure. Back here in the code.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, let me go ahead and do the last one again. So I'll do the Chua. So it's an anchor element with an open and closing tag, and the open and closing tags have to bookend the content that you want to be clickable. So open anchor before, closing anchor after. And then to make it actually clickable and make it so that it's, well, hypertext, so you click on it and go to another page, tap on it, I should say at this point. Then you put the href, hyperreference, attribute, and then tell it what page you want it to go to. So like speakers folder / chua.html, which doesn't exist yet, but we'll make it next time around so that the link actually goes somewhere. Okay, is that what you wanted to see? Does that help?
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Okay, looking back one more time at those helpful links underneath the, or useful links underneath the classroom here. So we talked about some of these yesterday. There's the CSS validator. Oh, whoops, what just happened? Video resizing and compression, this stuff, I'm not sure if we're going to get there or not. Last time I ran this class at the end of the semester, we were doing websites that promoted a certain activity, and a lot of people wanted to post videos to the page instead of just images, and so that's why I've got these guys in there. But I'm not sure if we'll get there or not. So one more thing I wanted to show you about this one here is underneath this HTML section under useful links. Check this guy out here, this last one here. The very first web page ever made and published is still online. And this is on cern.ch. CH is Switzerland. And CERN is the organization who employs Tim Berners-Lee, who is the fellow who created hypertext markup language and wrote the first web page, this one right here, and then to some extent helped out with the creation of the first web browsers as well. Mark Andreessen quickly took over that task and started working on Mosaic and Netscape and then Mozilla after that. Let's go ahead and click on this guy right here. So info.cern.ch/hypertext/www.theproject.html. Click on that sucker. This is it. This is the very first web page ever published, and it is still online, and hopefully it always will be. I'm hoping this guy never ever goes away. I'd like to first point out that this was prior to CSS, and images and media and tab browsing and all kinds of stuff that we expect these days. If I pull in the browser window, I'd like to point out that this very first web page is actually mobile friendly. This page would work perfectly fine on a touchscreen device with a small screen real estate. No problem whatsoever. It's in the intervening years that we got distracted from this sort of thing and started doing more and more layouts and so on. And now we've come full circle and we're back to this again, trying to create web pages that work well on mobile and doing mobile for CSS style sheets and so on and so forth. So here it is. Let's take a look at the source code. So you guys might remember, any web page that you get to online, you can look at the source code. You can see the HTML page that the browser is reading in order to build this document. Now, you can't necessarily access all of the elements that have been changed by JavaScript unless you go to the inspector, right? That's something different. But going to the source code here in was it Edge? I think it was just Control U. I keep doing Control Shift U, but that brings up the screen reader, which actually is kind of a cool thing. The browser has that. But I would just Control U. Here it is. Here is the source code for the very first web page ever, and this is like HTML1 here. I never used HTML1. HTML4 was the first one that I ever coded in. This was right around the turn of the century, maybe slightly after that, 2001 or so. Maybe before. You know, it was a little before that. Anyway, like some of the stuff like I never did is something like name equals like putting numbers on these names. I've never done that. Next ID, I don't know what this is. I think I read about it once, but I don't remember what it is. Never used that. So some of the stuff is very old, but it still works on newer browsers. Here's what I want us to do for an experiment. I'm going to copy this code here. And by the way, notice other things about it. Like we were talking about like the all caps for like element names and so on. You can do that, like I was saying, but this looks old-fashioned when you do, because this is the way that the syntax was originally conceived way back when in 1990 or so, about 33 years ago. Crazy. But you could still do this if you wanted to. Notice the hyper reference attributes on the anchor elements. There's the A element, so it's a hyperlink. That was one of the very first things in HTML. Here's an H1, which is that top level heading. I don't know if there are other headings in here or not. There's something that we don't know yet. This is the DL. I mentioned it though. It's a definition list or data list or dictionary list, whatever. I think the actual term is description list, but everybody calls it something different. But remember I was saying that this DL does not have list items in it per se, the LIs. It has DTs and DDs, definition term and definition description. So this, again, it's not something you see so often, but it's interesting to know that this was the very first kind of list that was originally conceived of for HTML. It's a more complex list. There's the body element. There's the closing tag there. And there's the opening. Notice this guy, header, was actually the original code or tag name for the head, what we use the head element for. Now, remember we put the title element inside head. Back then it was called header. Now header means something else entirely. And it actually goes inside the body. So let's go ahead and select this stuff here. I'm going to do Control A to grab all this, and Control C. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to pop over to the new validator here. And instead of doing file upload, I'm going to change this to text input. And I'm going to select all this stuff. Whatever's in there, it'll give you some boilerplate there. Just delete it all and paste in this code from the CERN webpage. There it is. Make sure I've got it all. And let's check it, just for fun.
I'm pretty sure it's going to say, Emmett Brown, get back in your time machine and go back to 1984.
Almost, yeah. 1990 or so. I think 89 is when Tim Berners-Lee was working on this, I think, and it was published in 90. But close. Okay, I'm pasting it in here. I'm going to check it. And I've got some red here. And I've got some warnings and some errors. Okay, so one of the reasons I wanted to do this, first of all, is just for fun. It's kind of fun to know that the first web page out there is still out there. But the second thing is I wanted to just lead you through fixing something like this in like using this validator tool to find the problems and then fix them. So you can do that easiest if you're in this text input thing. Otherwise, you have to go back and fix it in your code, save it, re-upload it, so on. Either way, whatever works more efficiently for you. But I'm just going to look at the very first thing. Consider adding a lang attribute to the HTML start tag. Now, some of these might seem kind of weird at first because you look through this and you say, wait, there is no HTML start tag. What is it talking about? Well, this is one of those weird things that browsers do. The HTML tag, the root element, oddly, is actually optional. Like you actually don't have to have it in there. And if you don't, the browser will supply it for you. It's not a good practice. It's not best practice, but it'll do it for you. And that's what's happening here. It's saying, hey, I'm seeing an HTML start tag, and I don't see like a lang equals EM on it. That HTML tag is not actually in here, but it's being supplied by the browser, or in this case, by the parser, right? So that's what's happening here. I can ignore that one for now, but if I wanted to fix it, then yeah, I would go ahead and, wait, is that really the first one that popped up? Yeah, that's just a warning though. But yeah, okay, let's go ahead and let's fix the errors first, because that actually makes more sense, I think. Fix the errors, and then if you want to, fix the warnings. So I'm going to pop to number 2. Here's the first error. Start tag seen without seeing a doc type first. So expecting to see doc type HTML. So yeah, this document type, like that was not required under HTML1. So I will go ahead and just add that in here. Doc type HTML. Okay, so we've added it, and then you can check it again. And without refreshing, anything, well, it'll refresh it, but it'll bring in, it'll carry over what you just typed in. Okay, so that error is gone. Element head is missing a required instance of child element title. This is another one of those weird ones. Look up here. There is no head element. There's a header, but there's no head. So what's it talking about? Same thing. The head element is technically optional. Professionally, it's not optional. Put it in there. But technically, yeah, it's optional, and the browser supplies it, or the parser supplies it, and then it's saying, okay, so you've got this head element supplied by the parser, and it doesn't have a title inside of it. So you could fix that either by adding the head element, or if you wanted to, just go ahead and change this to what it obviously was back in HTML1. It was a head element. Just get rid of the ER. Now, right off the bat here, I know that I'm not going to need this next ID here. And I'm just going to delete that first. I just want a head with a title. And now I'm going to check it again. Okay, that one's gone. Warning, the name attribute is obsolete. That's all these names on the anchor. Remember, this is where you wanted to link to anchors as much as you wanted to link from them. The rest of the stuff is all warnings, and it all has to do with the name attribute until you get all the way down to the end here, as I recall. Error, stray in tag A. This is the only thing, and this is a little bit embarrassing for Tim Berners-Lee, I think. This is the only thing on the page that actually is an error, even in HTML1. It's an error. The last anchor here, which starts here, closes there, and then there's another stray closing anchor tag here that does not belong there. So that's the only actual error on the page from HTML1. But if we get rid of it and check, now we have made this thing compliant with HTML5 fully 3 decades later. Some warnings, certainly, but other than that, no errors. And all we had to do, we added the doc type HTML, we changed header to head and got rid of that weird next ID thing. And then we got rid of the stray end anchor tag at the end of the document. And we now have a valid HTML5 document from 33 years later, which I think is kind of cool. And then if you wanted to, like once you fix all this stuff, you could do a select all and copy it again. Go back to your code editor, if it lets me. There we go. And then paste it on in. Or like replace the other code that you had that had errors in it or whatever. And then you could save the file from there and open it up and you'd have yourself a valid document. Okay, so I think that's kind of fun to take a look at. The very first web page ever. There it is, still there. Fun to play around with. So a final warning.
Just goes to show nothing on the internet ever disappears.
That's right. That's right. Well, some things do. Um, I think the content of all of those Usenet discussions that we had back in the 90s, I think those are gone now. I don't think anyone carries that stuff anymore. But on the web, certainly, things are there forever. And if they're not there really, then they're there on the Wayback Machine that you can find. Any questions about code validation or anything else that we did tonight?
No, sir.
It's probably a piece of cake for you guys after all the stuff that you've been through before now, huh? This is like building with Lego logs,
Yep.
Lincoln logs or something.
No, actually, this is the first time right here. I mean, I would rather get into a Cisco router and configure that.
Well, you'd have me beat there for sure.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, declarative programming languages, the simplest kind to start with. So let's go ahead and I will stop the